You grow through hardships. An easy day at the gym isn't a good day at the gym. So why are we looking at easy days in life being good days in life? And oftentimes we wait for hardships to find us before we start to unlock a better, more evolved version of ourselves or grow from it.
Humble, it's good to have you here. How you doing, man?
Fantastic. Thank you for having me.
Of course, I've been looking forward to this. As I mentioned, and I think you recall, I met you years ago, and been following you ever since. And just as I mentioned pre-recording, I just thought you'd be someone interesting to talk to on this topic. For anyone that hasn't seen or followed Humble, he offers just so much tremendous advice on life in general in so many different aspects, and specifically he's a multiple-time author, and his most recent book, How to Be Loved, I thought was an interesting take on, his book wasn't the take on this, but my interpretation of how his book could maybe relate to this conversation. I mean, it's love in general, right? So I feel like it doesn't fall too far from the tree.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe to start, and obviously we're going to kind of go in many different directions, how I guess maybe some of your writings in the book and the focus around love can relate to someone maybe going through grief, because my interpretation, as I mentioned, was I think when you lose a loved one, I think it's important to love yourself in many ways on getting over the grief process, as well as showing love to the person you lost. So I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, completely. I think, there's a universal element to this. We're just talking about relationships, and it's like, if a friend of mine lost somebody important to them who I didn't have a relationship with, I'll feel for my friend. And I want to be there, and I'll probably show them a lot of grace. I'll probably offer to be there for them. I'll probably do a lot. And I think oftentimes we have to extend that to ourselves. We have to extend that grace. We have to go easy on ourselves. And I think very often our own personal relationships with ourselves is so full of these expectations of who we should be, what we should do, and sticking to some sort of script or template. And that applies to the lives we live, but it also applies to how we deal with challenges, including, the loss of a loved one or grief, and giving yourself time, as much time as you need versus as much time as your job may give you, or as much time as your friends may give you, or as much time as anybody else, because you are the deepest connection you have with yourself. There's nobody else that's going to know what's happening on the inside. So I think that's really important in establishing that relationship with yourself. It's the most essential thing you can do, because if you don't have a healthy relationship with yourself, it's impossible to have a healthy relationship with anybody else.
Right. I mean, how much of that turns into projection, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Especially when you're going through shit. And another aspect of this conversation, off your book again about how to be loved, as we mentioned prior to putting the mic on, I got some slack when I kind of mentioned in passing how, losing someone in a relationship can have similar effects as grief of losing someone to death. And once again, I'm not saying they're the same thing, if whoever said that is listening, but they're like, through my own process, it feels like loss. You know what I mean? I'm not saying again, it's the same thing as losing my dad, but it's almost more frustrating because that person is still alive and you can't access them.
Yeah.
Or the fact that they are accessible, I can't access them. So it's almost like a frustrating sense of grief. And is that a big inspiration behind your book in regards to?
Yeah, my book came from, the irony is my book is inspired by a breakup, with somebody who ironically put this interview together.
Right.
So it's, we're on healthy terms, clearly, if I'm doing this interview. But, what you learn is the heart doesn't break the same way twice. So it's almost, when I was younger, I used to tell myself, oh, if I went to something really big, like you get shot, you can handle a punch in the face. But it's like losing a parent, for example, doesn't necessarily equip you to lose a loved one through a breakup or deal with rejection or, lose a job or a life circumstances. Your life was headed in one direction. You had clarity in where you thought it would be, and then all of a sudden that's gone. And that in itself is a death. It's a death of a reality. It's a death of a plan. It's a death of a dream. It's a death of a goal. And these themselves, it's a death of understanding somebody and also your identity. I have a big chapter in here called What's in Your Wallet. And it was realizing how much value I placed in other people and how they saw me. And in the moment I lost them, not only did I lose the person, I lost the identity that I had, whether it was the praise I thought I got, whether it was the status I thought I achieved, and all of that went out the window. So the question of what's in your wallet had me redefine what I held of value to me. And I started creating things based off what people couldn't take away from me. Nobody could take away my ability to tell the truth. Nobody could take away my ability to have love. Nobody could take away, my ability to chase my fun. So when I started making these kind of the bedrock of my value and my identity, I had a deeper and stronger sense of myself. And so often, and the goal of this book is to understand how many things we think are love and are not, and that becomes a situation where, sometimes we exist in the shadow of somebody else. And all of a sudden, they're no longer there and we can't handle the light. Or vice versa. We only had our value because a certain person propped us up. And the moment they disappeared is the moment that we no longer feel like we matter. That value was never really there to begin with. And so I think it's really important from that concept. And as I said, like the subtitle in this book says, going easy on yourself. It's challenging when you exist in a public space, because when you say something, everybody can only meet you where they're at. So, if somebody else is grieving the death of somebody in this present moment, they don't want to hear about you having a bad day and getting stuck in traffic. They don't want to hear about some of the other things that we consider. And yeah, I think there's a good argument for some people that we are turning our dilemmas into problems. But at the end of the day, somebody's worst day is their worst day. And somebody's most painful loss is their painful loss. Losing a parent at a younger age versus being an adult and losing a relationship in a world of coulda, woulda, shoulda. Maybe if I did this, maybe I did that. Your brain is replaying all these conversations and what you couldn't or couldn't have done, which again is natural, but that in itself is going to start to feel way heavier than knowing that you lost somebody in a circumstance that was completely out of your control. And I think all of that should be honored. All of that should be understood, because for you to try to minimize that, pain isn't going to help you integrate it and heal from it.
That's so true. And even, blended with the two things that you said in regards to being easy on yourself and understanding the difference of what you have in your control, I think that does relate to any kind of grief, regardless of where it comes from. I think being easy on yourself is such a simple lesson, but it's so applicable to, it doesn't have to be death or a relationship, anything. I think I personally tend to be, I'm my own worst critic, and I definitely I think that's my biggest obstacle is myself. I think that applies to a lot of people, but I know that for me. And sometimes you got to be easy on yourself and on the blend of understanding what you can and cannot control. And the only thing you can control is what, like you said, like something about is internal and what's inside your head.
Yeah.
And I think that is a really good lesson for someone that is grieving or going through this or that, to kind of just be easy on yourself and let yourself feel what you feel, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, and I'm exploring the world of mental health a lot, because probably the next book I write is going to be around anxiety. And you start to realize that the anxiety, the pain, the stress, these aren't the enemy. The challenges come and the pain comes, or it gets worse when we try to suppress that. When we try to suppress the pain, when we try to suppress the anxiety, when we try to kind of bury these down so we don't feel them. And as you said, going easy on yourself could also just be giving yourself space to feel it. For example, I pitched myself for a certain project today. I've been pitching for the last couple of months. And then today I got a very kind rejection notice saying, thank you so much, really appreciate it. And they didn't even say we're going with someone else. They said, we're not doing this anymore. So we're not, the thing that you wanted to be a part of, we're not doing it. For me, it still feels like a rejection because I really wanted to do it.
Yeah.
It's not like I lost to somebody else, but it's not happening. And I had been daydreaming about this for weeks. I sat down, gave myself time to just feel it, have my inner child be a complete brat and kick and scream internally or do whatever I needed to do, hug my puppy extra tight, do all of that and be like, okay, cool. You've had your time. Do you need more time? If you need more time tomorrow, you can have more time. Now, what are we going to do next? What clarity does this bring you? Because this would have messed up or impacted your schedule so much for the next couple of months. Now it's not happening. Now we have this time to focus on other things. And now my logical side can kind of take over. But I couldn't do that if I tried to suppress myself and be like, nope, not going to deal with that. Let me just jump into another project and distract myself or medicate myself or pretend it's not a big deal or start giving myself a bunch of, cliche lines like God doesn't close the door without opening a window. It's like, no, I wanted something. I didn't get it. It sucks. I feel bad. Let me feel bad. And I can feel bad. Maybe I can journal about it. Because if I leave it in my head, it'll feel a lot heavier. Express it, scream it, punch a pillow, do whatever you got to do for yourself. And then I can move on. And if it starts bothering me again, I'll revisit it. And I think that's the important part with dealing with any pain. I think suppressing the pain isn't a thing. And I have people near and dear to me in my life who at young ages also lost family members, and they weren't in a position to process it. And they were also not in where there were environments where people were like, oh, well, leave them alone. They just went through some shit. But it's like, they still required structure. They still required discipline. And they made a bunch of decisions at that young age that have impacted them now in adulthood, and it's impacted their ability to get, employment, their health, all of that, because they just kind of wild the fuck out. And at this point, it's something that we have to kind of understand, which is like, being your own nurturing parent, being your own best friend, it is giving you, the hug and the space, but it's also giving you the kick in the butt if that's what you need as well. And it's really understanding what you need at that time. And I think that's really important for all of us to establish that relationship with ourselves.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a fine. What did you mean by they're not in the position? Did you mean just mentally or externally or both?
I think like one dropped out of school, turned to a lot of substances, and nobody wanted to say anything to them because they had lost a parent. But at the end of the day, like now, they're an adult and they don't have a lot of options when it comes to employment, because their education isn't really, really high. They don't have a lot of job experience, work ethic or anything. And then also, they've become addicted to certain substances because they started really young. And as I said, like nobody wanted to say anything to them then.
Do you think that is based on not knowing what to say? Or obviously there's many variables, but I feel like in relation to what someone says or doesn't say, I still feel like, and I may be wrong here, I'm curious what you think. If I'm the one going through it, I feel like sometimes we expect other people to know what to say or know what you want. And I think everyone handles situations, whether it's grief, this or that, differently. So I think it's up to us to let people know what you need, because some people need space, some people don't, but maybe they don't want to be a burden of someone else. So I don't know what the right situation is on both sides, because even though I'm the one going through it, it affects the people around me, and those people get convoluted on, do I say something? Do I give them space? And then sometimes there's animosity between those two parties, which is why I think some families kind of get intertwined, because everyone handles it so differently. And I forget what book it was. I'm sure it's in a bunch of popular books, but everyone receives information differently and gives information differently. And I think it's so much, like sometimes you can't expect someone to say something to you the way you want to handle it. It's like the love languages and vice versa. So I think there's like, what is the balancing act of that dynamic between those two parties?
Yeah, I think honestly, and again, like, everyone comes from different contexts and different economic backgrounds, and they know what they know and they don't know what they don't know. If we want to talk best practices, I think if anybody has lost anybody, or if anybody's going through intense grieving of any capacity, I think definitely professional help is always probably the best option. You can be my homie for 20 years, but if your car breaks down, you don't call me because I don't know what to do. You get someone who knows what they're doing, how to fix a car. And there are mental health professionals who are not only better equipped, but they have the bandwidth and they have the tools and they have the understanding, and they can focus on you with a level of emotional detachment that's probably necessary, versus your friends and your family can love you to death. That doesn't mean they know what to do or they know what to say. They could be making things worse for all we know. And I think this understanding of, look, when there are problems, let's find the people who are best suited to help us address that. So I think, if there was a young person who had experienced intense loss, I think some level of, therapy would be much better, versus like, oh, leave them alone, let them figure this out, while also, they're in the formidable years of their life. And some of the decisions they make is going to set the trajectory for the rest of their existence.
Yeah, especially at a young age, is this the whole nature versus nurture thing, and nurture is fucking powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like when you, besides professional help and them knowing what to, more equipped and experienced in shitty situations, perhaps, I sometimes kind of getting insight or perspective from someone as unbiased as outside the circle, you know what I mean? It kind of gets a fresh pair of eyes, because I think when you're going through stuff and you get advice from certain people, they're looking at it from a different lens. And sometimes when you're vulnerable in a shitty situation, you can take their words in a misconstrued way. Just like when you say something in a book or online and someone completely takes it a different way, I think it's really it's very fragile, and I don't even know what the hell you do about it.
You don't do anything. People are going to meet you where they're at.
Yeah, you ever see Pinocchio, the original Pinocchio?
Yeah.
So there's a scene. Sorry if I've said this on the podcast, but Jiminy the Cricket is on top of this little cupboard, and he's laughing at something, hysterically laughing, and he turns and sees a statue with an angry face, and he goes, and he gets shocked, and he looks at the camera, and he says, "Well, you can't please everybody." And that's been a corny ass motto of my life. I've realized that I can say certain things, especially as this podcast grows. It's reaching more people, and the more people it reaches, tends to be a little all these little rats show up and start saying some shit. And I realize I'm as long as you do things with the best intentions sometimes, and do it in a real authentic way, you're not going to please everybody in any aspect of your life. And I think that comes to a level of acceptance.
Yeah, I think there's a Steve Jobs quote, which is if you want to make everybody happy, give up on your dreams and sell ice cream.
So that sounds way more reputable than me quoting Jiminy the Cricket. So thank you for that.
No, actually, no. The irony of it when you brought up Pinocchio, I watched Pinocchio I just watched Pinocchio over the pandemic.
Really?
After listening to a really long lecture about the movie from a clinical psychologist breaking down it as a form of advanced storytelling. So even Jiminy Cricket, because what Jiminy Cricket represents is your gut. Your conscience. And Jiminy Cricket was a good example of that, because Jiminy Cricket had Pinocchio's best interest in mind always, but Jiminy Cricket wasn't perfect. So it's almost the idea of you can trust your gut has your back, but your gut is not perfect. So Jiminy Cricket represented that. And also JC for Jesus Christ. So it's a much deeper film than it lets off.
Wow, I don't know if you just validated my what I've been thinking, but that I need to watch or listen and read whatever the hell you just did. That's crazy. I've said that pretty often, not even on the mic, to people when it comes up and it's in context. No one's ever answered like you just did.
Yeah. That's crazy. Humans have been passing down important wisdom through stories forever. At the end of the day, irrespective of your religious beliefs, nobody will argue that the Bible is one of the largest, most collaborated, most successful pieces of literature ever. So it's a lot of human beings put a lot of work into putting that together, and a lot of human beings have read it. You know what I mean? It's a successful for a reason, because it does represent a lot of our storytelling elements and our universal wisdom. And so often we can present our wisdom without even knowing it's wisdom collectively. And through our storytelling, it's the same thing. And a lot of the early Disney storytelling really had that. Even the new stuff has that. I just read, I didn't read, I listened to an entire podcast breaking down Finding Nemo, which again, super, super, the whole premise of that is if you love something, let it go.
Oh, shit.
If you love something, let it go. And they give you a character who's the father. And what do? They kill off his entire family. They kill off his wife. They kill off all his kids. They leave him with one egg. So now he has plenty of reason not to let go of the one thing he has. Then what do? When they hatch the egg, it's a little fish with a small fin. Even more reason not to let this little thing go. So, and it's just showing you, so what, in the art of storytelling is, this is how we learn these lessons. And at the very end, he has to set his son off to go save Dory. That it's not that he just lets go. He has to actually say, okay, you go back into the danger to save our friend. And the whole journey is him going through a tug of war of that simple idea. If you love something, let it go. Let go, let go. And it's so beautiful how we can do that through stories. It's something that I've been studying a lot because I want to start writing stories outside of nonfiction. And because that's the most effective way we've been telling these. And again, we'll reference Pinocchio, Finding Nemo or what have you. Is because this is how we were drawing on caves stories, right? But those are us. That's how we learn.
We're storytelling creatures.
Yeah, and they weren't doing it for clout back then. They weren't counting likes. They were just doing it. There's a beauty to that.
Yeah, no, it's for real. Yeah, I mean, the stories it sticks with you, and it's relatable, and it's just so much easier to tell. It's just, I mean, this podcast I'm doing is essentially sharing people's stories in many ways, and
we learn our stories through hearing other people's stories.
Yes, and lessons and wisdom, and you can learn through other people's mistakes, and that's another thing that I'm just thought of now. It's cliche as well, but I think there's so much value in experience. Obviously, I think that's the best teacher, getting thrown into the fire, but part of this conversation is by listening to someone like you and other guests that I've had is to learn from those people and what they've gone through. But then, sometimes I don't know what it takes to register and have these people have us feel equipped without experiencing it. Sometimes it's hard just to get the words and stories engraved without writing a Finding Nemo.
Yeah, but sometimes it's also about just having that kind of that lesson dormant, until it matters.
Yeah.
Somebody could give you. I remember getting girl advice when girls still had cooties, back during that pandemic.
They don't have them anymore?
I mean, not for me. But, you would hear certain things as a super young person, and it wasn't relevant to you then. And then you experience it.
Yeah.
Whatever the advice may be. And then you're like, oh, that was always sitting in my backpack.
Yeah.
It just didn't make any sense, right? And you also start to understand why cliches are cliches. Like
I always say there's always there's a reason why it's a cliche.
Yeah, there's a reason, like the beaten path is beaten for a reason too. And it's like, all this universal wisdom doesn't have to get repackaged and said anew. It's just we have to go back and see the relevance of it. And every day, somebody new is born and they have to learn all these lessons. So I think there's a beauty in that, in us. Me personally, I believe everybody should see it as essential to share their story. I think very often right now, the way we've kind of set it up with, creativity and celebrity culture is that it's some sort of privilege to share your story, to share your creativity. Because what you're doing, creativity is just sharing your story in a different medium. Some people are dancing their stories. Some people are drawing their stories. Some people are rapping it. Some people are sculpting it. Some people are painting it. Some people are coding it. It's their story, And I personally believe, humanity benefits when every potential storyteller shares their story. The more people that tell their story, the better. And education is the way to provide people an opportunity to figure out how to tell their story. Because some people don't think, many people don't think the same way as other people. And I think that's what the beauty is. Like I drove my car here. Somebody gave a shit about cars to make that happen and innovate that. I don't think about cars. I don't think about bridges. I don't think about the ocean. These are certain things that I don't think about. I serve my purpose in doing the thing that I do, and I'm part of this greater system. And I think all of us being a part of this greater system and contributing to it in whatever way we can, I think is important. And that starts with our own personal story.
I love that. Yeah. And I think what I've learned from these conversations, that people that have reached out to me, people want to share their story, even if they don't have a quote unquote following or they're not doing this or that. I don't know what that is about people that want to share their story that don't have an outlet to do it. I don't know if is it a release for them? Is it a feeling of being understood, of importance? Like, what do you think is the drive for people that want to share their story? And some people don't.
I think the weight of our stories, I think the weight of our thoughts in general are way heavier in our head. And they're much more fragmented in our heads. So when we get them out into the light serves as a kind of a disinfectant. Whether you tell your story, whether you write your story down. That's why journaling is so important. It's if you feel overwhelmed, journal, write. If you feel underwhelmed, read. Just read, write, relationship. And I think also we have so many primitive survival mechanisms that have been in our software for tens of thousands of years that served really important purposes that have next to no purpose in this modern world. I remember, listening to a podcast about a woman who kind of dragged her husband out of bed to go on a ski trip. They lived in a ski neighborhood. She said she really wanted to go, dragged him out of bed. They went. He got caught in an avalanche and passed away. And The story was about the haunting of the regret that she continually had replaying the story over and over. And they attribute that the replaying of the story is not regret and haunting. It's an old biological function that we have to replay the story long enough until we learn from it so we can evolve past it. You know, that's a situation where, you know, obviously you can't evolve past it because it's a woulda, coulda, shoulda situation. She didn't know dragging him out of bed to go on this ski trip was going to lead to that. But there's other situations where touching a hot stove, you know, burns your hand. You have to replay that until you integrate the learnings, you know. But again, none of these are perfect systems. That's why we're continuing, you know, all of your regrets deal with your past. All of your anxieties deal with your future, you know. So this past regret concept is us replaying it. And it's just simply just being aware that it's a piece of software that's not serving us will let us know that, look, there's nothing wrong with me. This is what humans, the vast majority of known emotions that humans feel, the vast majority, like 80% are negative. And the reason they're negative is because negative keeps you alive.
All right, survival.
Survival.
Yeah.
You know, we're not in the world that we live in right now where our physical safety is not a daily thought anymore. That's like 200 years old. But, you know, we're dealing with software and DNA from 40, 50,000 years ago. You know, so and the analogy I like to use is like, you know, you buy your cell phone, it already comes with apps pre-built in and you can't delete them, right? That's what the paranoia, the regret, the anxiety, all of these things are, you know, they're software that's already built in us, has very little use anymore, but we can't undelete it. But at the very least, let's not look at that as some sort of failing on our part.
Interesting.
There's nothing wrong with us for replaying the same stories over and over and over again. And if you go through therapy will encourage you to do it even more and even more intentionally, where you take the most traumatic moments of your life and you sit down and you write it out. And then you wait a couple of days and you do it again and you keep doing it. Even during breakups, one good piece of advice I learned recently was keep talking about the breakup until you're sick of hearing about it.
I heard that.
Yeah. But again, it's getting it out. Because if it sits in your head, it's going to feel a lot heavier and it's going to feel like a lot more.
Thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring this week's episode. I've never done therapy prior to trying out BetterHelp myself, and it only took me 33 years to try it, but they made the experience a lot easier to navigate. I'm not going to lie, I always felt a little bit nervous to go to therapy, and to do it at the comfort of my own home in sweatpants with the ability to access a vast network of therapists to find the right one for me made it a lot easier. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service, and it's 100% online. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 25,000 and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. To get started, you just need to answer a few questions about your needs and your preferences in therapy. That way, BetterHelp can match you with the right therapist from their network. Then you can talk to your therapist literally however you feel comfortable, whether it's on the text, chat, phone, or video call. You can message your therapist at any time and schedule live sessions when it's convenient for you. If your therapist isn't the right fit for any reason, you can switch to a new therapist at no additional charge. With BetterHelp, you get the same professionalism and quality you expect from in-office therapy, but with a therapist who's custom-picked for you. More scheduling flexibility and a way more affordable price. We'll give you 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/deadtalks. That's betterhelp.com/deadtalks. Now back to the show. That's what I meant to ask you. You kind of just reminded me of a question that you mentioned earlier about kind of sitting in it and not distracting yourself with substances or just constantly staying busy and not pushing it away.
Mm.
Is it, I think you just answered it, but I always thought, is it because I'm very individualistic in a sense of not who I am, but like literally being alone. I'm comfortable being alone, which leads me to really sit in my shit. And I'm starting certain things I've started to feel better about. And I just wonder, I can't tell if it's my perspective shifting based on contemplating it so much, or literally just letting the feelings do its job and eventually it just simmers. Like maybe it's both, but I don't know. That's what I'm saying. When you're saying constantly writing it out, I don't know, is it like desensitizing you? Is that just literally letting the energy out? Or is it a blend of that and like shifting your perspective based on looking at it from all angles?
I think what it is I think sometimes the weight of it is not as intense as it actually should be. It's because it's new and it's foreign to us. we've all been, anybody listening to this podcast, I'm assuming has been alive for at least 15 years.
Yeah, except that one dude.
Except for that one 8-year-old listening right now. But and if you've been alive for at least 15 years, you still believe whatever emotion you're feeling is permanent.
In the moment.
Yeah. You like, we even though we have a flawless history of everything we've ever felt has gone away. Fortunately or unfortunately, nothing is permanent. So the happy feelings don't last. The unhappy feelings don't last. But when we're in them, we think these storms are going to be here forever. And we create more problems by avoiding the storm. When the best way to reduce a storm's impact is to walk into it. Because if you walk away from it, it's just going to follow you. If you walk into it, now you go through it. And it's just, and again, there's nothing wrong with us for believing that we shouldn't be unhappy. Again, it's all you see on television, happily ever after, eternal bliss, religion sells us all this shit. Like, it's all these ideas that are sold to us all the time. You can always be happy. And it's like, that doesn't even make sense when you take some time to critically look at it. No one's ever learned anything from their happiness. That's why the majority of our emotions are negative. You learn through negative emotions. You survive through negative emotions. You grow through hardships. An easy day at the gym isn't a good day at the gym. So why are we looking at easy days in life being good days in life? And oftentimes we wait for hardships to find us before we start to unlock a better, more evolved version of ourselves or grow from it. And what needs to happen is when things are good, that's when we need to practice involuntarily put ourselves in tyranny. And again, the Stoics, for example, I think, one practice they have is like leaving your family 2 days a month, sleeping on the floor, cold showers, like literally voluntarily depriving yourself of all the things that matter to you in your life. You do that 2 days a month, you're going to dramatically appreciate that stuff way more for the other 28, 29 days. I just recently, and again, this is just an example. This is an artist. I recently came across an artist who was she was in a relationship with a dude who hadn't fully realized that he was homosexual. So she was in a non-physically intimate relationship. And I was like, why are you sticking in it? She goes, I'm exploring the torment of it.
Oh, geez. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's like, one way to do it.
That's one way to do it. But I guess the beauty in it is volunteer on her part. She's like, I'm voluntarily putting myself through torment because I'm going to create art about this.
Yeah, and you're building stress receptors. I mean, I've seen what you posted on some time ago. You put yourself in. I think you did with Hoff and
Wim Hof ice.
Yeah, that shit is because I've done cold plunges, but what you're doing is what you did, and it's like a totally different level.
Yeah,
but it's the idea of putting yourself in discomfort. I think is important on a daily basis, even if it's like a little tiny thing.
Yeah, cold showers.
Showers. I mean, for some reason that actually felt harder for me than the cold plunge. I don't know if it's because it was like just dripping on me and it was little by little, but the idea of putting yourself through those situations better prepares you for when it does happen. And it's like you said with the stories, kind of keep it in your backpack, and when shit happens, like, oh, I can apply that. But in relation to what you just said about, once again, relating it back to someone that's grieving or has lost or just open to the conversation, in the moment, it feels like it's never going to end. And I think I love the idea of going, you can't, like I said it before, you can't go up, down, around it. You got to go through it. But it's just, it's always easier said than done, because I feel like when I get in certain places, I feel like I do go through it. And then when I'm on the open sea and there's a storm surrounding me, you don't see the end sometimes. You just got to trust that, it's going to part.
Yeah. And I think it's also, everything is easier said than done.
Of course. Yeah.
Can
we think of one thing that's literally easier said than done? I mean, that's vice versa. That's easier done. What are we saying? Easier said. Now it's easier done than said. What's easier done than said?
What is easier? I don't think there's anything.
I'm going to think about that one. It might take a while, but I'll come back to
that. any verb is easier. It's easier to say the verb, walking, talking, sleeping. It's easier to say sleeping than it is to actually go to sleep. That's what I'm saying. Everything is easier said than done. And again, and nobody's, and I think what it often is us making the differentiation between simple and easy. I used to be an elementary school teacher, so I I try to frame these things as simply as possible. That doesn't make it easy.
Right.
You know, if you say you want to lose weight, it's simple. Consume less calories than you burn.
Yeah, you want to do a push-up, it's just that, but
it's simple. It's not easy. You know, and that's everything. So it's even when we have these conversations, and the thing too is, especially when it comes to our resilience, it's not supposed to be easy. There's no value in it becoming easy. And again, we live in an Uber Eats culture. We live in a culture where everything is becoming more and more convenient, and not recognizing how much that is hurting our resilience. Because when hard times find us, which they do, which everybody has experienced, you know, even with the pandemic, you know, some people were more prepared than others in different capacities, because for some people, that was the first time their resilience was tested. That was the first time, you know, people losing their shit over not being able to get a haircut. Like it was the first time they were inconvenienced.
Yeah, like you said, what you said, the worst thing that ever happened to you is the worst thing that ever happened to you.
Yeah.
And so in those moments, that's the worst thing that's ever happened.
And that's whatever, you know, versus had they voluntarily put themselves in certain situations and be more difficult. And I'm not trying to minimize, you know, the challenges of the pandemic for different people for different reasons, but you start to realize that. And I think, you know, even for me, realizing, you know, having a day job as a teacher versus leaving that and becoming a full-time artist and entrepreneur, it's leaving the zoo, the comforts of the zoo, for the jungle. You know, in the comforts of the zoo, when you're in the zoo, you feel like you're trapped, but then you also forget that you're safe. And the food comes, somebody brings you your food, and those cages keep you in, but it keeps everybody else out. And then one day you're in the jungle and now you're free, but you're also, you know, you are, you know, you're prey. Yeah. You know, and you got to find your food and you got to figure it all out. But you do that long enough, you build a resilience. You know, and I think, you know, that's how I kind of feel with me in my journey. It was like I at some point I was thrown to the wolves, and it sucked, and it took a long time to adjust, adapt, and evolve. You know, but once I did, I built a new level of resiliency. That doesn't mean hard days aren't. You know, I'm hoping my best days are ahead of me. I'm hoping my worst days are ahead of me. You know, because that's the experience of this, you know, temporary thing we have called life. And you're going to learn from the bad days. You know, I don't learn too much from the good days. And I think for me, it's really important that we kind of look at it from that perspective, because so often we view suffering, unpleasantness, discomfort, unfamiliar. We view these as the enemy for some reason. And it's like, listen, every single human being on earth is spending most of their energy just trying to be okay. Because we are, you know, we are consuming, life is being consumed by the world around us, by the thoughts we have, and by the emotions we have. And none of these can be completely trusted, but all of these things are impacting us all the time. And the most work we can do is realize that we are separate from all three of these things. We are the observer of these things. You know, we are observing something that happened, and our world is way bigger than we can consume. Our brains are definitely ignoring machines. You ignore certain smells, sounds. Your brain is trained to ignore things that are in place, to focus on things that are out of place for survival.
Negative.
That are negative, yeah. But then also that means everything in your life could be going well, and you're hyper-focused on the one thing that's not, because that goes back to what our brains have been designed for. You know, we can't trust everything we think, because half our thoughts in our head are from other people that they've been slowly planted in there, you know. And then we can't definitely trust everything we feel, because very often the things that we feel are impacted by so many other factors, you know. And I've been really trying to pay attention to that lately, in terms of like, I'm having a bad day. Oh, somebody says something to me that's really bothering me, but I was like, oh, but also, am I hungover? Am I hungry? You know, what did I just go through social media for an hour and get triggered by seeing some things? Yeah. And really just trying to be aware of that. And our only salvation is going to be that awareness and watching ourselves go through these experiences. And, you know, the time spent with Wim Hof and going in ice, you're literally volunteering to put yourself in ice water. And the feeling of being in ice water, the beauty of it is, A, it never gets easier, ever. And B, it's going to make you feel like you're going to die. Like you feel like, I am going to die. And if you don't do anything and you just stay in there by whatever miracle, it gets easier, right? You're not supposed to spend more than 2 minutes in there. So just do it for 2 minutes. But then once you know you're not going to die and you keep going in there, the feelings are still there. Now the question is, how quickly can you change that reaction to a intentional response? So, when I first went there, I'm there with a bunch of alpha dudes, and we're trying to go for I stayed in for 13 minutes.
Damn, that's long.
It's long, and also I could feel there's the mind over matter pain, but then there's also pain in my toes that feel like, oh, my toes are gonna fall off. I really should get out.
Yeah, the extremities take it the worst, right?
Yeah, and it's as I said, like this isn't some sort of voodoo. Like this is, you can survive a couple of minutes. You don't want to be in for too long. And then, speaking with medical professionals that work with Wim, because Wim himself, he's a nut. He just wants you in the water. Then he's like, now let's jump into the sauna. But he has an entire academy of medical professionals. And they're like, listen, idiots, don't go in for more than 2 minutes. The goal here isn't how long you can stay in. The goal is how quickly you can come to peace in there. And you do that through your breath. Because one of the biggest challenges we have in life is that we breathe too shallow. So going in the ice, everyone does that. You're taking a cold shower. Instantly, you're breathing deeper. Your body already knows what to do. And that's what Wim kept saying to us. We kept asking him questions like, what if my fingers fall off? What if I get hypothermia? He's like, your body will know what to do. And he's right. We breathe deeper. But now if I go in knowing to breathe deep, the first thing I do is I go in and I take super deep breaths. So I got myself to probably maybe 45 seconds. So the first 45 seconds, my mind's like, get out, get out. You put too much ice in, this is too much. And then within 45 seconds, like, oh, we can do this. And then the next minute and 15 seconds is just, I'm good. I'm good. I can pay attention to different parts. I can squeeze my elbows into my ribs and feel a little bit warmer. I can close my hands. I can squeeze my thighs. I know what's happening. And then when you get out, that's a whole other journey of how quickly you can bring yourself back, because your internals are still warm. Your externals are really cold. They're about to mix. And when the second they mix, your body's going to shake uncontrollably. So it's like, how quickly can you get yourself back to a regulated state? And that comes from doing push-ups, doing squats, doing different things, finding the biggest muscles in your body and activating them. So it's really about that awareness. So it's the same thing where it's like, there's nothing wrong with us for having emotional reactions. How quickly can we turn that into an intentional response? Someone cuts you off in traffic and you lose your shit. How quickly can you, is that gonna haunt your week, your day, your hour, your minute? How quickly can you bring that back to an intentional response? And that is just, as I said, an intentional breathing, being aware, observing yourself, not owning the stuff that's happening. Instead of saying, I am sad, say, I am experiencing sadness. I think I'm a failure. I'm currently having the thought that I'm a failure. Separating yourself from that makes a massive difference. How we speak to ourselves makes a massive difference. And this is why I'm talking about love, because this is your relationship with yourself. This is what you realize when you're in a relationship with somebody else. You have a kid, you have to be mindful of how you speak to them. Same thing. And you're willing to do that work because you love them. The love isn't what makes you work with them. The love is what makes you do the effort and do the work to make that relationship harmonious.
Love is the fuel, huh?
Love is the fuel, not the glue. Yeah. And it's the same thing with yourself. So it's like, how do I, and we're in situations, you're self-employed, I'm self-employed. We have the best boss and the worst boss we could ever have. We have the best employee and the worst employee we could ever have, and we'll say shit to ourselves that we would never say to anybody else that works for us. We would say shit to, our, we allow shit from ourselves that we would never allow anyone else to say to us. And nothing comes from that. That's the thing. At the end of the day, being like, you idiot, you're supposed to get X, Y, Z done today and you didn't. The question is, what good comes from that? Does that make you work more efficiently?
Those words you're saying.
Yeah. It doesn't even lead to anything. Versus being like, hey man, okay, we were supposed to do this today. We didn't do it. Got caught playing PlayStation, got caught doing some other stuff, whatever. All right, we got to make up for this. Let's figure something out. Let's come up with a better game plan. All right, tomorrow we're going to get X, Y, Z done before we even look at our phone. Let's honor this commitment. Let's do this. And now we're saying it from a place of love, the same way because we're speaking to our inner child. Our inner child has a steering wheel. The adult version of us is just in the passenger seat. You can't scream and yell at them. They're just going to freak out and we're going to go back into our autopilot. We have to speak with love. And then, the more we do that, the more we'll build our self-respect. And the more self-respect we build, the less self-esteem we chase on the outside. Because that self-esteem and chasing that outside validation is where all the trouble's at.
Yeah, there was so much gold in there. Oh, I don't even know what I mean. I almost want to just like hit stop, like I said this multiple times to deserve the mic drop right there. But I think it all ties together. And like I said, going through trauma and grief, where you said be easy on yourself and have those conversations with yourself. There's a book called what was it? I think it was Untethered. They kind of had a similar.
The Untethered Soul.
Yeah, Untethered Soul. That's what it is. Yeah, and it kind of had a similar analogy. Whereas like if your thoughts and your internal conversation was a roommate, you'd think you'd send this guy to this insane asylum. And I think that's a really good perspective of looking at it and realize how you do talk to yourself and kind of, like I said, like you said, be easy on yourself.
Yeah.
And in regards to the ice bath that you're doing, that put me through an entire process of what going through shitty situations or grief or whatever journey you're going through. I feel like it was the exact same process. You go through it, like we've already said, and you allow yourself to feel it, but also you start kind of closing the deviation between your reaction and your response. And I think that's a sign of healing. When you do start, instead of feeling shitty for 2 weeks, all of a sudden I feel shitty for 1 week, or like you said, 45 seconds, that gets smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
That is such a beautiful lesson on how we got to handle our shit when we're going through it. And like you said, everything's transitory. And
yeah, and that's how he discovered it.
Through
his wife committed suicide.
Oh, no shit.
His wife committed suicide, leaving him with 4 kids. And then, he goes, I was trying to make the pain go away. So then I saw ice water and I sat in it because I figured this would make the pain go away. And then that opened up a whole new journey and a door. And even most recently, he had he has a podcast with Frank Ocean, because Frank Ocean recently lost his brother in a car accident. And then they're discussing grief. And it's this whole all the ice. This is all birthed out of grief.
Yeah, it makes between Jiminy Cricket and this. I don't know what's better, but that's how I saw it.
Yeah,
like, I was listening to what you were saying, but I saw this movie in my head. I felt literally like it was like a promo for what he's doing, because I felt exactly like the right process. I'm not saying it's right because I don't know what's right, but it seemed exactly how you get out of grief is going through it and being aware, feeling it. Yeah. And also kind of having these positive, loving conversations with yourself out and being easy on yourself to get through it.
And it's also, and I think it's interesting too, because it's like, again, even our definition of grief still relates back to our context. So like, going into ice, what that does is it raises your threshold of stress to a level that most of us didn't realize we had. Doesn't matter. We could have grown up, born and raised in California or in the tropical islands. Doesn't matter. Go in the ice, all of a sudden you're like, oh, the primal animal that I am is way more resilient than I understand. But we also see that spectrum of resilience depending on people and where they're at. I recently went out, got invited by some women to go out to a party, and then one of the women there was Ukrainian and explained how many times she told her dad to leave the country, and he kept saying, "No, my building's good. I have to help clear out the building. There's too many elderly people there." And then he got caught in a shelling. And her speaking of it, but her growing up in a reality where that's a lot more common, the way she speaks of it, the grief, or, my father, losing siblings early, young siblings living in the village, one drowns in a pond, one dies, at birth, this stuff when it's a lot more normalized and it happens a lot more often. Or in a lot, especially in densely populated areas or areas that are rife with conflict. There's a normalization that comes with that. It's almost they don't have the luxury of the same level of grief that some of us, may experience in other parts of the world.
Desensitized.
Yeah, desensitized. Sometimes they're not in a situation to even process it, and they carry that forward. And it's like, as I said, like hearing my father speaking about some of his losses is like, he's talking about them the same way he's talking about what he did in the day. And it's like, he's never been exposed to mental health. He's never been this concept of PTSD. All of these things aren't there, but it's not like he's not feeling it. That's just the reality he had to be. And he was in survival mode, and his priorities, impact that. But you can start to see the spectrum of resilience from that capacity. Whereas some people, they lose somebody and, that's it. It's a wrap. And again, I'm not here to minimize anybody's experiences. Everybody has different relationships with different people when they lose them at different times. Um, but at the same time, I think being aware of the spectrum of resilience and committing ourselves to increasing our resilience as much as possible. And none of that takes away how much somebody matters to us. I think it just impacts how much we are controlled by it. Because at the same time, too, a lot of us have people depending on us, and a lot of us are part of this greater system of humanity.
Yeah, I think we need that more than ever, is that idea that we are a part of a system, like a system of life, not a system of politically or anything like that. I think we forget that we're all kind of part of the same puzzle. And I know we're all on our own journey, but, through words like yours, I think it helps. And through stories, like we said, it helps connect people and make you feel less alone. And we're all kind of part of the same. I think we're all the human race it doesn't seem like it ever throughout history, especially today. It's just, I don't know, it's just different now. And I think it's even through certain times when it's chaos in your life or externally, it's the best time to come together. And, I think everything you've said is just so applicable. Like I started the podcast to so many aspects of life, whether it's love, grief, loss, and job trouble, anything. It comes back down to kind of how we can converse to ourselves and love ourselves, right?
Yeah. And it's also, as I said, like we're all in this together. There's a lot of, if your priority in life is power and profit, then it's in your benefit to keep people at each other's necks and separated. And that's generally the tool, so when everyone picks a team, and I think people got to realize that it doesn't matter what team you're on. If you identify with the team, you're contributing to the problem. We're all on the same side. And if and if there really is any teams, it's the haves and the have-nots. And the haves want the have-nots to be fighting amongst each other to keep this controlled. But, we have gotten to this point, especially with consuming the world through a phone. There's a level of detachment that, I have a friend, Aubrey Marcus, and he started a project called United Polarity. And what he does is he'll post articles about, especially during COVID, he would post articles about, mass COVID deaths in areas that don't believe in vaccination. Then he'll post an article about mass vaccination deaths from side effects.
Dope. So he'll play devil's advocate, see both sides.
Please see both sides, but then also in the captions, he'd be like, if you felt validated from any of these articles, realize you felt validated learning about people dying.
Oof.
And he goes, and that's where we're at with this tribalism. Like, if you felt satisfied with either of these headlines, both these headlines just told you about people who died. That's how much this tribalism has got to us now.
Wow,
I'm proving my point by saying X, Y, Z, or it's like there's a mass shooting happening, and we're more concerned with who did it than the fact that a bunch of people just died. To prove our political agenda. And I think not realizing that having a political agenda and arguing with somebody else who sees it differently, it makes us part of the problem. And I think that's something I think that's really important for us to understand, because when we have that with other people, we're going to have that same level of warfare within ourselves.
And I think it also, like you've said, it all starts with us. I think everything starts with us, right? I mean, we got to love ourselves. We got to be aware and have these positive conversations with ourselves and fix ourselves before we can try to fix anyone else or love anyone else for that matter.
It's also you have no business trying to have any relationship with anybody else if you're not putting any efforts to yours. And I think about the times that, especially when I was in my transition between, leaving my job and then not knowing how to do this creative field and being in a really bad place financially, having to move back home, things weren't working out. And then you're still on social media watching other people show their highlight reels. And even though I've never, my pain never made it all the way into the comment section, the thoughts were there. I'll still be a hater. But the only reason I'm a hater, because it's my story. It's my pain that if I had put it in the comments. So whenever I see somebody say something unpleasant about me, it's their story. And one of the ways that I've found harmony with that is just realizing, anybody who says anything about me, including anybody who listens to this podcast, they're in the nosebleed section of my life. They have such a limited view of who I am that I can't give value to their opinions, both negative and positive. If they say, oh, this guy sounds like an idiot, that's as valid as someone saying this guy is one of the smartest dudes I've ever heard. They have a limited view of who I actually am. So I can't just accept all the praise and then like try to push away the slander or dismiss the slander as haters or whatever. It's going back to the idea of self-respect versus self-esteem. Is my relationship with myself means that how I feel about myself is what matters most. Because I could send a bunch of insults your way right now. The only ones that are going to hurt are the ones that you've been saying to yourself. There's something inside you that's holding hands with my insult. Otherwise I could say a bunch of random things to you and it's not gonna penetrate because it doesn't matter. And that's generally what it is. And I have a lot of friends who are extremely public figures, and these conversations happen, and you start to realize like there is this morbid abusive relationship
with ourselves,
with the public, but it really is a reflection of ourselves, because they'll be like, people don't even understand me and I'm trying to do something good and this X, Y, Z. And I was like, yeah, but there's also a button to like literally turn off the comments.
Yeah.
Why hasn't that happened?
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to have to, and it's like, well, now this is kind of like me listening to somebody in an on-again, off-again relationship. It's something else, and, it's probably some level, it's some form of twisted abusive relationship where there's unintended rewards. And that's what people do. It's the same reason people gamble.
There's always a payoff and everything.
There's a payoff, and you don't know when it's coming, so you'll deal with all the bullshit.
Yeah.
Same reason we scroll through our phones. It's just trash, trash, trash. Comparing myself to somebody, trash, 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 bad news, negative news. Oh shit, cute puppy. It was all worth it. And it's that same concept. It was like reading all these negative comments, but then maybe somebody who says something mean about me, somebody else is going to argue with them. But the truth is, like, look, man, the social media is about getting attention, and it's an attention economy. So people are doing what's necessary to get attention. Some people show their butts. Some people give controversial opinions. Other people say mean things in the comments. Because if let's say you hit a certain milestone and everyone's congratulating you, and then I say, you probably bought the followers, I'll instantly get more attention. Instantly, my comment will bubble up to the top. That's the thing when you want attention. The negativity will always capture more attention than positivity, because negativity is quick and it's there. Bad news is quick. Good news is never quick.
Yeah, fear sells, right?
Yeah, and it's just really important. And as I said, like the only goal with all this and me saying it is just build an awareness and just look at it from a perspective like, oh, okay, this is how things are. And now I can choose to engage in it or not engage in it, or I can pay attention to how I feel when I look at this stuff. I can look at now, okay, you went through a breakup. Now, if you're flipping through your phone, and then you see a couple at a wedding, it's going to trigger you. But if you're not self-aware, you're not going to know why you were triggered. You just feel the trigger. And then you might be like, oh, no, this just means I'm hungry, or this just means I need a cigarette or a joint, or need to turn on some porn, or need to call a booty call, or do something. But if you're aware of it, you're like, oh, okay, this was a trigger. Let me be mindful of that. Or let me communicate to certain people that I won't be attending their weddings, because that's just going to be a very bad weekend for me. And it's becoming more and building this relationship with yourself, because we do it with other people. We start to protect them and learn their triggers and help them and work around their stuff.
Yeah, why are we focusing on that?
Yeah. And because we derive value in being useful to them. But we can derive that same value being useful to ourselves.
That awareness is obviously that is what it is, but it's also, you have to be honest. It has to be honest awareness, right? Because I feel like it's times where people just literally just BS themselves, and that's catastrophic.
The biggest lies we tell her to ourselves, and the biggest promises we break her to ourselves. And it goes back to that, because there's value in doing all this temporarily and telling ourselves these lies. And as I said, like the negative emotions, another wonderful example, and you start to see it on social media now, is those who want our attention will pull on our heartstrings, and they use self-pity. So now every single community, however they identify themselves, is a victim in some capacity. Everybody is a victim, right? And it's not about minimizing what people are going through, but everybody has been framed as a victim, depending on what echo chamber you exist in. But the challenge with that is there's no empowerment when you're the victim. There's no empowerment in that situation. And again, to take empowerment doesn't mean to take blame. It just means to take responsibility. The analogy I use is if you get in a car accident, somebody rear ends you. Definitely not your fault. Insurance, going to the auto body shop, getting repairs, all of that is your responsibility. Sitting there feeling sorry for yourself will accomplish none of that. If you want to get your life going again, you're going to have to assume all that responsibility. And all that responsibility is where your power is at. Sure, it was somebody else's fault, but this is where you are now. This is what you have to do now. And I think very often we don't look at that in that terms, because we can be controlled and manipulated when people constantly remind us how hard our lives are. And I'm not saying your life isn't hard, but where's the power in that?
There isn't.
There's none. There's only power in looking at your responsibility in your own life. That's the only place you have control. And focusing on that means not focusing on how hard your life is, and focusing on what options you have, and also what privileges you have. Do you live in a part of the world where you have to worry about bombs dropping every day? Do you live in a part of the world where you can't drink the water out of the tap? Do you live in a part of the world where, at any moment the government can just take away all your stuff, or has taken away all your stuff? This is realities for most people around the world.
So that the variables, those external variables, that some people start on third base, some people don't.
Yeah.
And that's it.
And I'm not even telling people to be grateful. I'm just telling people be empowered with where you're at.
Right. Yeah, but I think like I said, if someone, like I didn't say actually, but if someone dies, it's easy just to play that victim role and be like, oh, why aren't you working or doing this? Well, so and so died, and I'm feeling so okay, and that's where you got rear-ended. But the power is in taking the responsibility that comes with that death and choosing to shift your life. And once again, it's much easier said than done. But anyone that is grieving or has gone through it, it is up to you. It's much easier to be sad, depressed, and feel that, but it takes work to be happy and get out of it. But I truly believe that everyone can get out of it. And I think a lot of the steps you've mentioned are the ways to do it, if you ask me.
And I also think it's, maybe not even, looking at it as I'm in it or I'm out of it. I think, and I'm sure you can relate to this with the various types of griefs that you've experienced, is it comes in waves.
I'm kind of feeling it right now.
Yeah. And I have a friend who's just survived a physically abusive relationship, and the conversations are like, I'm totally over it. I only needed 3 days. I'm totally over it. And then the next day, like, why do I feel like I should just, it wouldn't get better. Let me just go back to them. And then the next day, it's like, I can't believe I was such an idiot forever. And I was like, or why don't we just start now and own that all these emotions are temporary, and the waves will continue crashing. Maybe the intensity will fade. Hopefully the intensity will fade over time, but the waves, are going to continue coming. And instead of being like, I'm over it, that's setting yourself up for the next one.
Right.
Versus being like, okay, I had a good day today. Another bad day is going to happen. Let me get my journal ready. Let me get my tea ready. Let me get my good friends. Let me get my feel-good movie. Let me get off social media. Let me notice what makes a good day better. Let me notice what makes a bad day worse. And now let me adjust that environment accordingly. Because I might feel like trash. And the first 3 times I felt like trash, I gave myself grace and had Taco Bell and smoked a bunch of joints and, took 10 shots of tequila. But now if I keep doing that, it's going to impact my ability to pay my rent, or it's going to impact my ability to show up for people who need me for other stuff. Let me go ahead and, make better decisions, and then slowly improve on that. And I think that in itself can be something. And again, that goes back to your relationship with yourself. And, that's a really important thing. And I think the other thing that I've also learned through relationships that I've had, both publicly or not public, or even with people I've known or people I've not known, is that, somebody can die or they can amplify, that, because very often, I think about, when Princess Diana passed away, like the amount of money charities raised in her name, and the amount of lives that were positively impacted as a result of somebody empowering themselves to use her memory for something good. I think about Nipsey Hussle, the amount of people now aware of who he is because of his passing. That is making a best of a situation that isn't ideal. And I think sometimes it's, you know, somebody passing away, honoring their life by amplifying them, amplifying the sides of them that are worth amplifying. That's something worth committing time and energy to. And I think it also allows people to have some deeper purpose in their life. And so often, a lot of us are struggling in life because we don't have purpose. And then sometimes the loss of somebody, as lost as that can make us feel, that can also give us a sense of purpose and direction if we want to honor who they were in their best version.
Humble, thank you, man. That was perfectly said. And I want to give you another opportunity before we get out of here to, if you have anything else to say, please, the mic is yours. But if you want to plug what you got going on, what's new with you?
I mean, yeah, just dropped the book, How to Be Loved. As I said, more than half this book is about what is love and how to have that love for yourself. It's not a dating book. I'm not teaching I'm not teaching people how to craft text messages. I'm not teaching people what to do on a first date. I'm helping people I'm helping people understand what love is versus what we've been taught love is. Like, love is not attention. It's not validation. It's not success. It's not power. It's not money. It's not admiration. It's not control. These are things. It's not attention. So often we think love is attention. It's like, these are the things that we spend so much time trying to chase. And if we realize that these aren't love, love is something that you build a pathway with somebody. And, I really do in relation to this podcast, like the Mitch Albom quote, Mitch Albom writes some of the most beautiful, saddest things. And he says, life has to end, love does not. And that fits very well, because you don't look at somebody and say, I love you. It's a Peter Crone idea. Is you look at somebody and say, I love, and you show me where love is. You create a pathway of love between you and someone. Someone is showing you where love is. And they don't have to be in existence for that pathway to remain. That pathway remains long after they're gone in the physical sense. And that's why I love that Mitch Albom quote, that life has to end, but love does not. Because their name exists as long as somebody knows them and says it, and also, straight scientifically, sound travels and has a half-life, but, nothing cuts in half and turns into zero. So every word anyone has ever spoken still exists. That sound wave is still traveling somewhere. So their vibrations will forever exist in this form, irrespective of what you believe, happens to somebody after they pass away. Every word the person you care about has ever spoken is still traveling and moving around. And it may be getting more faint and faint and faint, but it never hits zero. And I think that's an important thing to remember, to honor their vibrations and honor their energy.
Damn, man. So yeah, anyone going through it, whatever that may be, like Humble just said, live with love. What else can we do? And if anyone wants to check out his book, How to Be Loved, I'll plug everything in the description. Give it a shot. And Humble, once again, man, I want to thank you for being a part of this. I appreciate it, just like I expected. I know everything you were going to say is going to be applicable to what I'm talking about and applicable to everyone's life, no matter what you're going through. So I truly appreciate you, and thank you for taking the time.
Yo, thank you so much for having me, man.
Of course, man. All right, guys. Humble the Poet. His information will be plugged in. Check him out. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Dead Talks. Later, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Dead Talks. Please do not forget to hit the subscribe button and also the notification bell. That'll give you updates as to when we post a new video, more episodes, and more content in general. We are streaming on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and all that. And also find us on Instagram at Dead Talks Podcast or www.deadtalks.net. Thank you so much.